Zoom recording. All right. So welcome to 3D Foundation. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you a little bit later where to get these slides, but let's go ahead and introduce our staff. Now, I'm just going to warn you in advance, our first two lectures of the month are usually our longest ones. They usually go about 2.5 to 3 hours, just because there's a lot to set up, and also we have to do that first day spill. So first off, and again, make sure that everybody can hear me. Hello. And again, scream at me if I do cut out, because I will be in my mode and I won't know that the batteries have died. So again, just let me know if you can. All right, so with that said, I'm Jared Metter. I'm the campus course director for 3D Foundations. Next is Brian Whitehurst. So if you were watching the screen, the other guy that had his video on, that is Brian Whitehurst. He's our online course director. A little bit on later today, you will be introduced to Sarah and Wade. They are our studio artists. They will be running the lab sessions. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice right now is that we both do online and campus at the same time. So right now, my campus students who are here today, you're going to see the live action part, and you will probably hear me answer questions that you did not ask. So what's happening is that I do have the chat session. Scott, can you do me a favor and go ahead and turn off your camera? So if you hear me answering questions, more than likely it was a chat from the online. I will try to do my best to make sure that when that question is asked, I will repeat it if y'all say it, and especially if online says it, and then from there, answer it. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and start talking about what is going to be expected of you this month. So hopefully by now, everybody's kind of read through all of FSO, which is Full Sail Online, which is where you go to see all our 3D Foundation content. Hopefully you read through most of the sections. I prefer everybody kind of read through everything, but the fact is that hopefully you read through 3DF, course overview, all that right there. But let's go ahead and explain what this is. So first off, obviously this is your first 3D class. So everything up to now has been core classes and intro classes, kind of getting you into the workflow of the college environment. Now you're getting into your first class outside of Art 1. Outside of Art 1, that really dives into what you're specifically here for. Now, let's go ahead and kind of talk about what is the overview for our class. So I'm gonna go ahead, launch this right here, and welcome to 3DF. So we're gonna give you a quick overview. So essentially 3DF is a very unique class than one of the ones that you're going to be taking on a little bit later on. We kind of give you the table of contents for what you're going to learn here during your 3D degree, which means at this point right here, you're going to learn bits and parts of a couple of the different parts of our production pipeline. Now, what is our production pipeline? Well, if we go right here, let me tab over. Our production pipeline looks a little bit like this right here. As we come up with the story and as we are trying to get it through and all the way to make it onto the TV screen, the movie screen, or even the video games, we go through certain different steps to actually create everything. So first we have our story, and then we have to go through the process of actually building the stuff for the production, and then getting it ready to animate, giving it that life, and bringing it all the way to fruition. That's the right word right there. So what our class does uniquely is that we actually touch on a good bit of these different parts of the production pipeline. So we kind of hit it in phases. So week 1, we essentially get you introduced to the 3D environment. So we introduce, the different 3D programs that we're going to be using it, and getting you acclimated to them, by which we're getting you used to moving around the camera and also move around the objects themselves. Week 2 is where we start getting into the base level of production, which is we start giving you different tools that you can use to build your objects. We start giving you references, and we give you a little room to play around with that. Then we end that week with showing you how to give the life to it. Those pictures, all that elements that we're seeing, that color, that is something that we have to physically do ourselves. Week 3, we get in a little bit more of a production workflow where we kind of start reining you in, which is we gave you the tools, we kind of showed you the different methods, then we need to actually show you the proper way to go about that, which is making sure that when we create our objects, that they're created properly, that they don't affect the different parts of the production pipeline. Because how we build stuff can affect how it animates, how it moves, and how it looks in the final element. So we have to go through there and make sure that that's set up for a more production outlet. Lastly, we take you through the notion of bringing in for production where we start actually introducing our last program of the month, which is going to be Substance Painter, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we also introduce you to the idea of the last bit of polish, which is us lighting, us texturing, us rendering, and then finally getting it into a game where we can actually play with it. This is an example of what you're going to have as a final turn-in. Any questions so far? All right, so with that said, let's go right here and make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, where did we go? Right there. All right. So before we start, let's go ahead and start introducing the different types of software we're going to have this month, which is, hopefully, has everybody started installing their software, or at least kind of started? All right, so just to let you know, if you haven't started yet, that is going to be your first goal this week, is making sure that you have the software installed. Now, we're going to also talk about a couple of key things, but the fact is that your main thing is that you want to make sure that you have your software ready to go. Now, obviously, we're going to have one software that we're going to use for most of the month, and then we'll trickle down to the different ones. But you want to make sure that you're solving any issues with your software this week, because we give you a little bit of room, a little bit of lax situation right there. So with that said, let's go right here and start introducing you to the different softwares that we have. We have Maya, we have, I don't want to put that in groups, go away. Substance Painter. So let's go ahead and introduce these right here. So first we have Maya Autodesk. So Autodesk Maya, actually that's flipped. Maya Autodesk is the all-inclusive 3D program. It takes us all the way through of being able to build stuff, to texture stuff, rig stuff, which is the element of us putting bones into our creature and our models, allowing them to be animated. And we can also do visual effects and rendering inside of it. So it's all purpose right there. Now, there's a couple of comparable programs that actually match that, like 3D Studio Max, Softimage, and even Blender. But right now, Maya is king. Now, one of the key things that we're going to teach you throughout this month, and hopefully it's carrying on past this month, which is the notion of learning why things happen. So that way, if Maya is not king forever, you can still take the knowledge that you have and just transition it to a different program. But this month, we will be using Maya 2020. Now, right now, Maya is trying to get everybody to download 2022. Make sure that you read through all these elements and pay attention to what you click on, because again, Maya wants everybody to move over to the new version. But the fact is that when it comes to professional work, we want to use the most stable version that's out there. We don't want to have to contend with bugs and all that stuff right there. Just give you all kind of like a notice. The reason why software companies give you free stuff is because you're free bug testers. So instead, let's make sure that we are on the right one. So make sure that you follow throughout that whole entire process and get the 2020, but also we use 2020.4. Now, this will also take you through the process and explain how to update right there. Most of y'all will have to verify that you're students. All you have to do is go right here, download this verification form, fill it out with your information. If you're not sure about that information, it should be on your profile on Full Sail One, or you can contact Full Sail Support and ask them those questions. It does not need to be signed, and it does require you to do a weird thing, which is you don't save out the document, you take a screenshot of it, and then submit the screenshot. So again, make sure that you read through all that. Also, last but not least, make sure that you grab Maya, not Maya LT, which stands for Maya Lite, which is half the program with half the functionality. Likewise, you can't take anything from Maya to a Lite, and vice versa. All right. Takes a few seconds to get the flow going as you're lecturing and talking a lot. All right, so with that said, next one that we're going to be using is Unreal. Unreal is the king gaming engine right now. And it's actually been for a while right now. It's comparable to Unity, which is its biggest competitor that we're going to be using this month. Now, the main point of gaming engines is that we build our assets in other programs and then import it into a layout setup, which is our Unreal. Now, Unreal has actually been stretching and gets fingers out more and more, getting into more of the architectural, textual visualization points, and also doing real-time production work, which is it was used on Mandalorian to do some quick effects as well too. So when you install this, you want to make sure that you follow all this information right here. Make sure that you're using creator license. But the key thing is that, again, Unreal wants you to get the latest and greatest. But we want to use the most stable version, especially for our Mac users. For some reason, the newest version of Unreal is not working properly and actually locks you out of some stuff. I don't think that has anything to do with their lawsuit with each other, but who knows? I don't run the company. But the main thing is that you want to use version 4.25.4. It's going to try to push you to 4.26. Make sure that you're on 4.24. Now, this again will take you throughout all the information on how to install that. Now, when you install it and open it, it will ask you, hey, where's Xcode? Do not worry about Xcode. You do not need it for 4.25.4. But if it requires you to use Xcode to open up Unreal, then that means that you installed the wrong version. All right, so again, 4.25.4, which is always fun to say multiple times, but it will allow you to run Unreal without Xcode. Now, from there, we are going to have Substance Painter. Now, just kind of warn you in advance, Substance Painter is going to be the last thing you're doing. We're going to use it until the last week. So you have, but set yourself a reminder sometime throughout this month. Make sure that you get that installed, because I've had issues with a lot of students, way more than I want to admit, that wait until the Sunday that all this stuff is due to install Substance Painter and realize, oh, wait, this is not working for me. You want to make sure that you try to run into these issues as soon as possible so you can reach out for help in our labs and our Discord sessions. All right, but with Substance Painter, it's going to ask you to verify. Just again, follow through all that right there. As far as Substance Painter, the latest version is usually the best. That's a little bit odd saying that after I say, hey, make sure that you get this version and this version. It's because every time that Unreal and Maya do updates, they try to reinvent the wheel. All right, and when you reinvent the wheel, usually you make a lot of bugs. Meanwhile, Substance Painter, they do little fixes. They do little add-ons. They do like little incremental things. That's how Adobe likes their stuff. They want you to stay on their subscription program. Blah. All right, so with that said, we do have a couple other ones that you want to grab as well too. So hopefully everybody by now has heard of Discord. It is one of the more popular gaming voice chat and talk programs. We actually have our own version as well too. So if you go to Discord and accept our invite, and again, just let you know, and hopefully this is just kind of common sense, all the stuff I'm talking about right now, make sure that you install on the computer that you're using to do your work. All right. Now, some of these programs do allow you to install and add on your phone, but when you use them on your phone, you lose a lot of functionality that's going to be a lot easier for you to get help. One of them is Discord. Discord will allow you to screen share and also drop in screenshots. That is one of the most helpful things for us right there. Next is Open Broadcast Software right here, which is a video recording program.
Hey, Jared, your audio has cut out.
All right, can everybody hear me? Hello, hello, hello.
There
How much battery life I have on this one right here? All right, full bars. This, that. All right, so I am back. All right, so I don't know where I left y'all off at. Hopefully it wasn't too long ago. But main thing of this page right here, make sure that you install Discord on your computer along with all the software that I've mentioned so far. Make sure that that's installed on this computer that you're going to be using for your projects. Likewise, also you want to install OBS, which is Open Broadcast Software, which you can use a competitor if you want. The main thing is that you're going to use that for your final project, and we'll explain more when it gets to that. But the key thing is get this installed, troubleshoot anything that happens, so that way you're not running into all these issues right when the deadline is happening. Last but not least, I need to remove this because we really don't use Photoshop in here. It's more of just like, hey, it's something fun to have and you're paying for it, so go ahead and install it. But just let you know, you do not need Photoshop whatsoever for this class. And actually, I can show you ways to actually do the stuff that I was going to show you with other programs as well too. But you're already paying for it in your degree program, so you want to make sure that you're aware of that and install that whenever you can. Now, if you run into issues, again, go to the lab, go to Discord help sessions. But next is Gyazo, or whatever it's called. This is a quick way of taking GIFs that are small enough for you to submit to Discord. This will actually help you because the class rules. Next is Grammarly. If you've probably already been listening to me more than 5 minutes, you probably noticed that I don't have the best grammar, all right? But here's the thing, we are sending emails to each other and communicating through text. It's imperative that we try to be as professional as possible. And one of the things I use to do that and cheat that factor is Grammarly. So if I use it, I suggest you use it as well too, because realize when you are sending emails to us, you're not sending it to your friend or your family, you're sending it to somebody who is in a more professional capacity. So you want to make sure that you're writing proper emails, spelling properly, and then also using grammar properly. All right, so trying to see if anything else. All right, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so we went through the software. Let's go ahead and go into course overview. So once that loads. All right, so let's talk about class rules. So first, what materials are needed for this class? Well, it's computer animation. First word, you're going to need a computer. All right, so if you have yet to get your lunchbox or don't have a system, you need to contact your student advisor as soon as possible so you can get that rectified, because honestly, past a week of not having your computer, it's going to be very hard to catch up. So you need at least have a computer. It needs to meet our hardware requirements. Now, if you have a Mac that came with the lunchbox, you're good. All right. If you opted out of the lunchbox, well, realize that your computer needs to be strong enough. Those $300 back to school HP computers, it's not going to run this. You may be able to open up Maya for a little bit, but you won't be able to get done all the stuff that you need to get done. You need to have a powerful enough computer to be able to do this. If you want to, just go ahead and look at the system requirements for each one of the programs and make sure that your computer meets that. That is not an excuse for not being able to turn in any of your assignments. So again, make sure that you're rectifying that as soon as possible. Next is, I only have enough time to teach you computer animation this month. I do not have enough time to teach you computers. So if you are not used to the Mac OS or just using a computer in general, make sure that you're doing everything that you can to catch yourself up on that, all right? But whether it's using these links right here that actually are a quick guide of how to use your Mac OS, or just to get on how to use your computer, because you have to understand your computer, because these programs are already going to be a little bit hectic to begin with. So adding that extra layer is strenuous. Next is that you're going to have to find your files. A lot of these programs exist because they have files in specific places, and you're going to have to turn those files in correctly for us to be able to properly grade them. Next is, and I understand the irony of this with me constantly getting a weak connection right here, but you need a stable internet connection. Realize, even campus right here, you will have Zoom sessions for some of your labs. There are only Zoom sessions, which we'll talk about in a bit. But also submit WACs. Make sure that you have in plan C just in case. All right. Next is the proper equipment for your computer. So far, it seems like everybody has a mouse. That looks good right there. So first, you need a mouse. Now, using your trackpad for these assignments. If I hear that you're using your trackpad, I'm not going to refuse to answer your question, but also at the same time, I'm not browbeat you. All right. Which means the thing is that when it comes to these professional programs, you have to have a different type of input. You will not be able to do everything that you need to do inside Maya, Unreal, and Substance Painter without the use of a mouse or your Wacom tablet. You can pick one or the other or use both. Either way, the main thing is that you don't use your trackpad, all right? Because that's going to hamper you and handicap you. So make sure that you have those two. And I'm not saying that you have to go buy the most expensive mouse out there. I think mine's a $15 mouse from Amazon. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to get like one of those hardcore gamer ones. The only thing I would probably suggest is do not buy that $100 Mighty Mouse, which essentially all they did was take the trackpad, moved it onto the mouse that has like that weird multi-touch. I would say don't get that one. Everything else should be fine. Now, going back to the OS, make sure that you are getting comfortable with either one. Keep in mind, if you are one of the people that got the launch box, I can't point you in the right direction. All I can say is YouTube it, but the fact is, realize that you can install Windows on your Mac if you want to, if that's something that you prefer to. And one of the things that you're going to notice throughout this month is I will be switching between Mac and Windows, just to give both everybody that flavor. And then also throw that out there. Most of the industry uses Linux. So if you haven't used that yet, get ready for it. Where do I find my assignments? All your assignments are in each one of the different sections. So right now, we are in lecture 1, which is going to be section 1.2. So everything that we're going to be doing today will be submitted to 1.2. Each one of the sections is a different lecture, and each one of them will have assignments that you will turn into that different area. Everybody's been at Full Sail for a while. You kind of understand that flavor, right? All right, sweet. So 3DF late assignments, we're not going to really talk about that until we get closer to our first deadline, which will not be until after spring break. Again, everybody knows that next week is spring break. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Hopefully, everybody is here knowing that they have class this week. That's the main problem, is that we occasionally get people just go on spring break like a week early. So how to properly email your instructor. So there's 2 ways to message us. One way is through email. So if you send us an email, make sure that you have all the specific information right here, which is your class code right here, which is going to be CGA 121. Next is your term ID, which is your month code. Your month code is the last 2 digits of the year, which is 21, and then the month that we're currently in. So we're 2107 for a month code. And then your section number. That is probably the most important part right there, because I believe this month we have 11 sections. So if you just say, hey, I'm John Doe, and I have a question. All right. Well, one of the things that we like to do before we answer your question is look at your work so we can actually personalize our answer to you. Well, if you say John Doe, then we have to go check 11 sections. For me, if I get that email, I just say, hey, thank you for the email. Please make sure that resubmit this with the proper heading. So make sure that you do that. Now, on the flip side, if you want to completely avoid this, message us through FSO, which is Full Sail Online. That's because we can only see messages for the sections that we are looking at. So if I get a message from John Doe on FSO, I know I'm already in this section. I can just look at his stuff. I will tell you personally, I'd rather have messages through FSO. All right, what's up? Yep, campus is always 00. Online is always 01 through however many sections. I think TEM, I think they have like, since they have that class for all the degree programs, they get into like the 30s or 40s. So, all right, little side note right there. All right, next is, let's explain the difference between the different assignments. So you will have lecture activities and you will have competencies. All right, so lecture activities are the assignments that we're going to be doing during lecture or assigned during lecture, which is usually I will show you a couple skills today. We will walk through those steps for that skill, and you will pretty much follow me along on these different activities. Once you're done, take a screenshot or etc., depending on what I need, and submit that. So those are essentially you following me word for word. Competencies are an assessment of your understanding of that week's work. So this week, we're going to show you 3D, we're going to show you how to move around objects, and we're going to show you how to move around different parts of those objects. And then from there, your competency is going to be, honestly, a brain teaser to see if, hey, if I give you this object with these limitations, are you able to make these objects using what you've learned so far? So lecture activities, follow along with me, or you will learn the skills that you need to do for that during this lecture, and then competencies are assessment of your understanding of the week's lectures. So you will have one competency a week. You will have several lecture activities throughout the week. All right, so from there, now, we're not expecting you to understand all of this or live in the vacuum. Where can I get help? So this is the key thing. This is where a lot of people miss this, and this is available to both campus and online students, which is our first way of getting help is we have 3DF labs. 3DF labs. Now, for my campus students, I always get people that say, I want hands-on help. First, due to COVID, there is no hand touching of anything. All right, so for the people that think help is the instructor sitting at your computer and actually doing the work for you, that's not going to happen. Actually, we deliberately try not to do that. Instead, we want to see and understand where you're at in the material. We want to know, all right, what is the disconnect? So that way we can actually try to explain it differently. Now, when you go to the lab, essentially you'll ask a question and then they'll try to walk you through those steps right there. They're not going to take control of your computer unless it's one of those things that needs a little bit of a finer touch, like a program not installed properly. But main thing is that first, 3DF is going to be your main point of getting help, where you can hop in there, ask Sarah and Wade a question, or get assistance with an issue. And from there, that is available to both campus and online students. Now, for my campus students, the campus labs will always be on Monday and Wednesday. Friday is always a Zoom session. For my online students, you are more than welcome to go to the Zoom sessions for all the 3DF labs. Any questions? All right, so next, where else can you get help? Well, we have our Discord. So if you follow along with all this information, please watch this video. Not only do we have a Discord for the full cell modeling department, let's go right here and click on that. There we go. So when you click on that, you will be brought to this page. Make sure that you please read through all that right there. Not only do you need to read the rules, but also you will need to declare your class, because when you declare your class, you will get access to the class specific channels, by which if you declare your 3DF, you will get access to the main 3DF channels where we have our FAQ, we have our announcements, which if you go there, you will be able to grab the slides for today. And this is where the slides for each one of the lectures will always be. So you can always grab them there. Next, you can also get to the 3DF critiques and questions, where you can actually drop in questions and tag us, and we will answer them next time we see them. Now, realize that this channel is not completely manned 24/7, so be a little bit patient. But another cool thing is that not only 3DF is here, but we also have channels where you can hop in there, ask questions, and also get to know other students throughout the degree program, and also alumni who are actually already graduated. Hence the word alumni. I always double down on saying the same thing twice. All right, so, and then we also have our support channels. Now, right now, there is nobody in there except for, I think, Cynthia. That's not one of our studio artists, but we will have studio artists in there throughout the week for 8 hours at a time. You can always hop in there, ask some questions, and hop out. Now, realize it's not always be a 3D people that will know the answers to your questions that are not specific to turn in instructions or project specific questions. So if you have a modeling question, they will be able to answer that kind of situation. Any questions about that? I know it's a lot of information to get through. Sorry about that. All right. Last but not least is our Copilot program. All right. Copilot is our peer tutoring program where you can either hop on their Discord, or I think they'll also have like a physical meet sessions as well here on campus, where you can meet up with a a student peer tutor and get assistance. Now they get booked up pretty quick. So here's the key thing. I showed you 3 main ways of getting help: Discord, the labs, and Copilot. If you are having issues with materials, please do not pick just one. You need to use all of them. All of them. That's one of the number one things I see students fail at, which is when they need help, they only go to one thing and then they bank everything on that one form of getting help. You need to hit all 3 and hit up any avenue that you can. All right. Last but not least, I always get asked, is there extra credit? Is there bonus points? The only extra credit / bonus points we have, because one thing that you'll learn very quickly this month is we're going to expect way more material than you've ever had to done for any of your classes so far. All right. So there's not separate projects that we just have laying around because there's already too much there. So the only way that you can get bonus points is make sure that you update your FSO profile. How many people have their picture on their profile? Make sure that their phone number's there. Make sure that they had an email that they'll actually answer updated. If you can do that all by the end of the first deadline, I will give you 5 points on your week 2 competency, which is usually your hardest one right there. All right. If you do that, I will give you 5 points. May not sound like much, but really it is the cheese at the end of the tunnel, because I can't tell you how many times I ran into situations where a student was 3 points from passing. So I'm calling them, no answer. Email them, no answer. And there's a time limit on when I can change your grade. Next thing you know, they failed just because they did not update their information. So make sure that you do that. You'll get bonus points and it can save your butt. All right, professionalism. All right, so professionalism is pretty much a free 10 points as long as you're not a jerk. That's essentially what it is. Be nice to each other, be nice to your instructors. All right, the only other thing that plagiarism can go into, well, professionalism can go into, is plagiarism. So if this is your second or more time through 3D Foundations, you should be aware of our policy on using old work, which is you can submit old work as long as it got 100. Honestly, I will tell you, you can submit all your old work if you want to, unchanged. Just don't be surprised when you fail again. All right. The idea is that if you got a good grade on it last time, you can submit it again. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be guaranteed the prior grade, because it may be a different instructor that grades it, and they may catch stuff that the prior one did not catch. But if it's a good project, that saves you some time, so you can apply that time onto the elements that you may need more time on. I'm going to say time another 300 times. But anyway, the idea is that if you turned in good projects last time, go ahead and submit them again. If you did not turn in good projects, improve them and then submit them. All right. So that is the only thing that we will allow. If you have prior projects and they were good, you can submit them again. I strongly suggest getting them critiqued by our studio staff or the Discord before you submit them. But also outside of that, plagiarism, which is kind of hard in COVID times, don't share any work with each other. 3D is not like a math problem. Not everyone's going to get the same answer, all right? When you model, when you do stuff in 3D, it's like a fingerprint, and it's very, very highly unlikely that you will have the same asset that is completely identical, poly count, structure-wise, all that stuff right there. So cover your butt, don't share work. Any questions about that? All right, so let's see. And I usually go harder into like plagiarism, but I don't really like sitting here and accusing people of something that they have not done. So again, as long as you're nice to each other, as long as you're nice to the staff, and you do all your own work, I'm at 10 points for professionalism. Any questions so far? Making sure that I went through all of this. All right, lectures and labs. Let's go ahead and kind of bounce back on that right there. So this is one of the weird ones, because like right now, if you're currently in lab or watching it, you've already read this section. So I'm preaching to people who are not currently watching this right now. So one, campus, let you know you have to either watch our lectures live on Zoom or attend the campus sessions to get attendance. We are steadily getting into the mode of taking attendance again and getting you prepared for September, where we actually get rid of Zoom sessions for all campus students. You have to come to campus. Now, if that alarms you, realize that you still have time. If you can't change your job or anything like that, you still have the chance to switch on to the online degree. So if you have stuff that is preventing you from going to campus again, starting in starting in September, start talking to your student advisor and figuring something out. But when it comes to our lecture sessions, we do our lecture sessions for both campus and Zoom and online all at the same time. So this right now is being recorded. Make sure that you have your name when you go into Zoom set to your first and last name as it appears on FSO. Now, if you prefer to go by a different name, make sure that you reach out to student support and talk to them about updating your name on your profile. All right, but the thing is that we have to make sure that everything is copacetic, and we want to go right here. That is our schedule right here. So week 1, we have Wednesday and Friday, and after that, we have week 2 and 3. Where we have Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In between these two right here, we have spring break. Now, we don't have anything due until after spring break. Now, one of the key things I'm going to say is your spring break. You figure out what you want to do. That's perfectly fine. Realize during spring break, we have different classes and all that stuff right there. So there will not be any support throughout that week. That's why we push our deadline past it. So we don't expect you to actually work during your spring break if you don't want to. All right. As far as our lectures, they all do get recorded. I need to actually update this right here. But a few hours after they get done, you will be able to access them and watch them on YouTube. Next is our labs. Our labs are located right here. If your campus right here, all the ones that are in bold are the ones that are physically going to be here. So you can attend them either through Zoom or on campus. The ones that are not in bold are going to be Zoom only. Let's see. Let's see what else. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So last but not least, already talked about that. We already talked about where to get help. We already talked about that. All right, keys to success. Please watch all the material. All right, I would not record it if it wasn't important. And it may sound daunting. I know, like these lectures are about 2 to 3 hours. There's a lot of material that has to be covered. And it may be tempting to just skip to where I'm doing the lecture activities and only watch those portions. Realize that we are building foundations. That means every grain of sand that builds that platform, that builds that foundation is important, because if you 3D is very A, B, C, D. If you skip over B, you will have a hard time doing C. You'll never make it to D. So you want to make sure that you're watching all the materials. And a good thing is you may not have the luxury of the time to do this, but watch first, and then on the second viewing to take notes. And that's one of the things that all the instructors are always going to ask you when you have a question. All right, what does your notes say on this situation? And if you say, oh, I don't take notes, well, they're going to tell you to go back and rewatch it, because this is not like high school math, high school literature, or anything like that. This is not going to be basic stuff that you're going to have to learn for everything. This is a completely new language and a completely new way of thinking. You need to take notes. Trust me, I used to be one of those people that never take notes until I started learning this stuff and it kicked my ass. And then I started realizing, all right, cool. I'm not going to be able to remember all this. I need to start writing stuff down. Now, if you have a hard time taking notes, grab my slides. One of the things that you're going to notice with my slides, it's incomplete information, because it's going to ask you questions like, hey, why would we do this? And then we have on each one of the panes a notes section. All right, be aware all the different content that you're responsible for. So if you haven't yet, start making a calendar. Start writing down your deadlines and what is expected of you, because being aware of what is due is going to help you plan. And then use the help when it's available. Realize you don't work weekends really. Occasionally I'll hop on and answer some questions, but for the most part, the weekends are our weekends to spend with our friends and family. So banking on somebody to be there to help you on the weekends is not a great way to go about it. We're here during the weeks. We have several different help sessions. Try to hop in as many as you can. And then last but not least, always ask questions. Do not assume. All right, assuming will hurt you. What's up? Yep. So that is a great question. So what the student was asking about where we can find the schedule for these Discord sessions. So if you go right here, underneath Discord, we have our support schedule. And inside of here, tell you what times people will be in there. So tomorrow we will have Sarah from 11 to 7, and then we will have Veronica from 1 to 7. What? Yeah, so. All right, any other questions? So once you declare your class as 3DF, so a student asked where to find the slides again. We will go right here, and once you declare it, you will be able to go to 3DF announcements, and they will be located inside of here, along with other videos or important information that we need to announce. All right. All right. So with that said, and again, we're getting some people saying that like they want to be able to talk. Realize that like during these help sessions, you can hop into a room and talk to them the same way that I'm talking to you right here. And then you will also be able to share your screen as needed as well too. Now, as far as off time help, you can always go into our 3DF channel and just mention an instructor or just ask your question and then just be patient, but somebody usually will answer it next time that they see it. All right. Any other questions? Again, this is all the stuff that we have to get through every month to make sure, you know, it's one of those things, kind of just reading the disclaimer and making sure that you're aware of the labs, the lectures, and then also the different ways of getting help and the rules, which again, are rules, just make sure that you're following the, making sure that you have the proper equipment, make sure that you have the right software. We do get questions from students saying, hey, can I do this in Blender or whatever name program? No, it has to be in our programs that we actually stated. So with that said, and you'll notice a couple of key phrases that I will constantly say ad nauseum. I apologize for that. It's my way of getting around but all right. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's talk about the stuff that we're here for. The stuff that you came to college, which is, let's talk about 3D. So first, let's go ahead and acknowledge our 3D world, the universe, us being here, all right? We gotta realize that everything that is going on right here, we take for granted. So for us to move stuff around, move objects around, all we have to do is either walk or move over into that location, pick something up, set it down, and do that over and over again as needed. But the fact is that we're not taking into account gravity, physics, the fact that objects do not pass through each other when we set them on top of each other. Dynamics, physics, all that stuff right there happen without us even thinking. We to the point where we can actually do things without having to mechanically think about those inside of our brain. Not so true when we get into the 3D environment. Not only in the 3D environment do we not have physics, do we not have gravity, except for Unreal, that will turn on naturally because it is a game engine. But the fact is that there's a lot of different elements that are out of the equation when we go into a 3D simulated world, which keyword, 3D simulated. When we're working in these programs, they're not 3D. Same way, if everybody ever heard of like the analogy or the history of the guy who drew the pencil, and underneath it, it was like, this is not a pencil, which is the notion of that is not a pencil. We can visually think of it as a pencil, but it's a picture of it. Same way right here, this is not 3D. So we have to wrap our mind around that. And you're probably going, well, no crap. Well, the thing is that we can logically think about that, but once we start getting in these programs, you're going to hit probably a little bit of a wall. And find it a little bit cumbersome to move around, move yourself around, move objects around, because we have to fight that urge of all the things that we're so used to in our real world. Now, the first thing that we have to get used to inside our 3D world is first location. So we know where we're at, but how do we find stuff inside our 3D world? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is lean on a class that some of y'all may either love or hate, but realize that you just picked a degree in it. But geometry, this is essentially it right there, which is our locations are on the axis of either X, Y, or Z. Now, depending on the program, those orientations may change, but they're always the same axes. So for Maya, we will always have the Y is up and Z as depth. Meanwhile, other programs like Unreal will use Z as up and Y as depth. But the thing is that we have to understand these locations. When we first start, we start at what we call the grid. Every program has this because that is the origin of where these axes are starting. Where that main cross plane is, that is what we call our origin. That's because the 3D environment, as long as we have the CPU power, the GPU power, the memory, the physical hard drive space, our world can go on forever. That's why we have to start at the beginning of it, the center of it, where it originates. Everything will abide by these rules because with our coordinates, we can assign locations. So if I say something is an X2, Y7, and Z3, that means it's in that physical location. Any questions about that? All right, so make sure I'm not missing anything. So we talked about that right there. All right, so with that said, 3D environment is a concept that exists throughout multiple programs, right? How many people have ever opened up Blender or even back in the day, Moto 3D or anything like that? Concept of 3D and a lot of things that we're going to teach you are all concepts that exist throughout all the different programs. While we're leaning solely on Maya, Unreal, Substance Painter, and then a little bit later on, different other programs like ZBrush. The main thing to harness from them is the concepts. Because here's the thing, like I said, these programs may not be king forever. There may be a new up-and-comer that does something way better and unseats that king program. And the thing is that will happen a lot. If you understand concepts, then you can change programs easier. It's the same concept as if you know how to drive, you can drive different cars. All the cars are different user interfaces that you just have to learn. But once you learn them, you can get back to driving. So with that, let's go ahead and load up Maya. So I've already installed Maya. So it's 2020.4. We can tell that by when I go right here and click on this. It's going to hopefully load up in the right screen. So we can get that pop up. I can already tell it's not. Let me go ahead and close this. Yep, it's over here. All right, so once it loads up, but you should get a splash screen, and at the very bottom, you should see Maya Autodesk 2020.4. If it says 2020.22, you want to make sure that you go back and install the 2020.4. Likewise, if it just says 2020, you want to make sure that you do the update because of two reasons. 2022, while having some awesome new features, is still pretty broken. All right. Meanwhile, 2020 is in the same situation, but it's 3 years old now. It's not the updated version. That's because of what these software do and their position inside the companies that use them. When you're a company and you ain't half a million, I heard today, I guess, show that the Amazon's doing is up to about 500 million to $1 billion. Well, the programs that are helping to drive that they want to stick with what works. They want to stick with their pipeline that they know is going to happen and do what they need to do. So that's why we don't constantly bounce between those. Now, we will get these two windows. All right. So first, let's talk about what we're seeing right here. So for some of y'all, you may be presented with 3 windows. In this case, we have our new features, which just pops up. If you want to, you can go ahead and tell this to go away forever. That's what I'm going to do. Next, you may get another white window that happens behind this right here. Think of that as Maya's little brother. All right. That is the output window. You just want to go ahead and minimize it. Now, depending on the situation, sometimes if you do exit out of that window, it may close Maya. So just to be safe, minimize that little output white window that happens. From there, we have our main big daddy, Maya, right here. So let's go ahead and introduce you to the different parts right here. So the different parts of the user interface, or at least the key parts that we're going to talk about this month. Now realize a lot of what we're going to show is going to scratch the surface, because the key thing is that we are 3D foundations, not 3D learn everything in 1 month. We set the stage for other courses to come along and build more onto. That's why I say that we're unique. We teach multiple different disciplines this month. When you get into model creation, guess what they do? They only focus on modeling. When you get into animation, they will only focus on animation. When you get into rigging, they will only teach rigging. That's because they're going to take what little bit that you know right here and actually grow it into something that is substantial. Which means when we get to these programs, we're going to scratch the surface of what they can do. All right. So we're not going to teach you everything that you need to know about this, because 1, it'd be too daunting. And 2, you may get into areas where you may cause some real issues. So with that said, let's go right here. And the first thing that we're going to look at is our top bar. This right here gives us a lot of information right there, which is the name of our scene. And then also the Maya number. So right there, we have Maya 2020.4. If you're having issues with doing that update, make sure again that you're going to the different help sessions throughout the week. This is also a great place to kind of take a mental note of, because as we open up files, it will show you that file's location. Now, one of the things that you may notice is that right now I'm in window mode. I don't like the full screen mode, so just kind of warn you in advance if it looks a little bit different. Most of y'all's will look like that. I hate that mode. Instead, I like to hold down Option and click the plus sign, so that way it expands everything, but doesn't go into that full screen mode. That's my pet peeve. You don't have to all do what I do. I'm just explaining it. All right. From there, we have our top menu. So if you've ever used any program, you're probably used to the notion of the file, the edit, or different options that are at the top. Pretty much, these are all the different options that we can use inside Maya. This is where we can get to options that are at the top. Pretty much, these are all the different options that you can get to. This is not the only way that we can get to these. There is the same thing. And Maya is all about speed and efficiency, and finding your own path that actually allows you to do both of those. Next is our area where we're going to talk about barely scratching the surface. If we click right here, right now we see the word modeling. This is our top menu subset. This will allow us to change that top menu to different parts of our production pipeline. So that way we can focus on those specific elements. If I'm modeling, I don't need my rigging tools, which is me being able to draw in bones. I don't need those. So this will allow me to filter that information out. Now, for the most part, we are going to stay in the modeling subset. From there, we have our workspace. So not only can we change the top menu, different items right there, but we can also change the way that our user interface looks to better suit us right here. Because everything that we're looking at right now can be ripped off. I can grab that, rip it off, put it in a different location, move stuff around. Even later on, when we get into different elements, we're going to want to pop into that different UI. But the main reason why I'm not bringing that up is, again, going back to everything that you see here can be ripped off and put into different locations, which scares the hell out of people who first are using this program, because you want your program to look exactly like my program as it looks in the lectures. That's perfectly fine. That's understandable. So if we accidentally rip stuff off, we can go right here to workspace, and down here at the bottom, reset current workspace. Workspace, reset it, and we'll go back to default. But I'm going to go back to Maya Classic, and again, right here, reset current workspace. All right. Now, below in this area right here, we got a ton of different icons. We're not going to worry about inside our top menu. Like that first one, that little sheet of paper that has its corner over, that's just file new. They just give you a different icon. So it's a different way of getting to different elements. Below that, we have our shelf. So this box right here is another way of getting to these different elements in here, but it's a little bit more organized, and we can actually create our own shelves as needed. So think of Maya as a garage. A garage has a ton of crap in there. It has a car, probably a fridge. It probably has like tons of different decorations for tons of different holidays, and it's all disorganized. Think of our shelf as a shelf inside the garage, a shelf where we specifically place the tools that we need. All right, so I know if I'm going to be modeling or building something, I probably have a shelf with like my hammer, all the different tools that I would need probably for a building project. And I can actually change this and create this as needed. Below that, we have our toolbox. The toolbox is the tools that we have on our tool belt that we always have access to. These are our main functions. And to describe them, we have our selection tools. So this is our marquee select. This is our lasso select. This is our paint select. So it's different methods of selection. That's key. For us to be able to do anything, we have to select something. Next is our different ways of modifying a structure. We have move, we have rotate, we have scale. Our cardinal movements that we can apply to an object. And then last but not least, we have this empty area. That empty area is reserved for whatever tool we're currently using. So as we use modeling tools, whatever one's currently in hand will be displayed there. So again, our toolbox is all the functions that we can get to very quickly off to the side of the window. Now, we will show you those, and then we'll show you how that you will never have to really go over there and select them ever again. All right. Below that, we have our viewport templates. Now, you're probably going like, what is a viewport? Well, this is our canvas or our viewport. This is where we view into our simulated 3D space. This is where a lot of our 3D work is going to happen. Now, so important, we have two different ways of interacting with it. We have our viewport, and then we also have viewport menus, and then the viewport icons right here. Again, all the icons are doing is giving you a quick access to stuff inside of here. Now, the main thing I'm going to bring up is we have a viewport menu, and then we have a top menu. So we will actually queue up those words as we're trying to direct you to where you need to click on things. So when we say viewport menu, we mean that menu inside the viewport. When we say top menu, we mean the stuff at the top. Now, inside here, this is where we navigate. This is where we can see our 3D objects, but also this is how we see our world. Now, how we see our world is the same way that we see our video games and see our movies. We see it through a camera. And right now what we're looking at is our perspective camera. We're looking through our perspective camera, which is a default 35mm camera. Again, those numbers are not going to be important until we start talking about that a little bit more on week 4. But we have two main ways of actually seeing our world. We have our perspective, which is a one-panel view right here. But if we go right here and click on this, it will bring up 4 different windows. This is what we call 4-panel view. And it brings up 2 different types of cameras. We have our perspective. And then we have what we call our orthographic cameras. Now, the difference between our perspective and our orthographic cameras is perspective is us. It's us walking around, looking at object, bending around and looking at it. This is how we observe our 3D. This is where we can make sure that everything reads in 3D, which means does it look good from all the different angles. But perspective is not the best way to build stuff, because as we look at stuff from different angles, what happens? A lot of y'all already took art this week, which is we learned about proportion and scale. And when we are moving around and looking in perspective, it can change our proportion and scale based on how we're looking at our object. So not a great thing if I'm trying to model a car to the exact detail measurements and all that right there for the next Forza video game. So that's where our orthographic cameras come in, which is cameras that remove depth. They are the 2D representations of our 3D world. They remove depth and allow us to only look at one 2D plane. So as I move this around, this will only move around in 2 dimensions. Meanwhile, this one right here will allow me to move in 3 dimensions. Now, a lot of y'all are probably going like, how are you moving around the camera? We will get to that in a second. All right. Last but not least. Oh, well, not last, but let's also talk about what this right here is. I know I skipped this one right here. We're not going to worry about that too much, but we have this little box right here, which will bring up our outliner. Our outliner is the laundry list of everything that's inside of our scene. So we can see all our objects, but this is a great way to kind of keep a list of what's inside of there. All right. Now I can say the last but not least. We're not really going to talk about this section right here because we're not going to use any of this right here. I'm just going to warn you in advance, we're not doing any animation. That is its own beast. You will have several classes on that right there. But the fact is that we won't really be touching on this area whatsoever. Instead, our last area that we're going to talk about is actually a combination of multiple different things. So we're just going to call this the sidebar. The sidebar, because we want to direct your attention to that side area, because there's numerous amount of windows that we'll be using in that area that we're going to say, all right, go to your sidebar and go and click on the channel box tab. Channel box tab allows us to see the different transforms or coordinates of our objects. Meanwhile, we will also get into modeling tools, which is a quick little tab that allows us to get to a lot of the modeling tools, and then attributes, but we will get to those in due time. The main thing is that we understand the attribute area, the sidebar. Now, let's go right here. Let's talk about how we move. Oh, you got a question? Okay. So first, let's go ahead and talk about how we move in 3D. How do we move ourselves? Well, to do that, please do not use this window right here. So if we go right here in a view, and there's actually like a quick way to get to like the camera controls, please don't use that. That is a crutch. All right. So never go in there, because one or two things. One, it's a crutch and actually prevents you from being more proficient in here. And two, our understanding of the terms. Does anybody know the difference between dolly and zoom? What's up? Close. So they are both different effects. So that's the key thing that you brought up right there. So we will explain that in a second. So the main thing is that let's go ahead and talk about our movements. To move around our camera, first we have to press down a certain modifier. On Mac is going to be your Option key. Hold down your Option key. Yes, I know you can hold down Command, but we'll explain why you don't want to do that in a second. On Windows, it's going to be your Alt key. So Option key on Mac, Alt on Windows. Just to let you know, they are in the same exact position because they are the same exact buttons. They're just on different OSs. Meanwhile, your Command is actually different buttons on Windows and Mac. If you press Command key on the Windows OS, it will bring up the Start menu. And it will also do the same thing for the Linux menu. Instead, we want to hold down Alt or Option if we're on Mac. And then This is where we learn who has a mouse or who has a trackpad. With Option or Alt held down, we can hit left mouse click or LMB in short. So left mouse click and drag, and that is our orbit. So Alt/Option left mouse click is orbit. So we're orbiting around our object. That's really chuggy. Yeah. Actually, I was doing this last month and wasn't really doing that. I may have some programs that I probably should have closed right now. I wonder if I still have like Unreal open up in the background. All right, so next is Alt/Option and right mouse click and drag will dolly, D-O-L-L-Y. You were correct, moving on a track. So I'm physically moving the camera forward and backwards. Now the difference between dolly and zoom is where I actually change the focal length of my camera lens. I'm keeping the camera there, but changing the focal length, which allows me to essentially zoom in. The problem with zooming in is that it will distort how we see our objects, and we will talk about that more on week 4. Alt/Option, right mouse click and drag, and we can dolly in. And then last but not least, which is what you can't do on a trackpad, which is hold down Alt/Option and middle mouse click and drag. That will pan. Pan. And using the combination of all these right here, you will be able to move around your camera and look at stuff from different angles. That's for perspective. Let's go right here, go back to our orthographic cameras. How do we move around here? Well, if we hold down Alt/Option, we can right mouse click and drag, and we can dolly in and out. We can hold Alt/Option and middle mouse click and drag to pan around. And then we can use Alt/Option, right mouse click and drag, meaning left mouse click and drag, and then notice nothing happened as it screams at us. Why can't we orbit in our orthographic? Say that again? It's coming from the top, or it doesn't have that extra dimension. For orbiting the work, we need all 3 dimensions. The whole purpose of the orthographic camera is that it's only locked to 2 dimensions. And that is by design. I always get questions on like, how do I unlock it? You don't, you leave it that way. That's how Maya wants it. I'm gonna try to close some of these. I was holding down Alt/Option. That's how you activate the camera. And then from there, you can hold down each one of the corresponding mouse buttons to be able to move around their specific purposes. All right. Yeah. Okay, so many windows open. Actually, I can probably close the whole thing now. All right. That's how we move ourselves around, and that's our introduction into Maya. So I'm gonna go right here and close this for the time being. We will be back. But now let's go ahead and hop back over to Unreal. Hopefully it didn't log me out. Then I'll have to do that awkward thing where, oh, I have to wait for a text message. All right, we're good. So that was Maya. Now we'll hop back in Maya and start doing our electro activities in a few minutes. But first, let's go ahead and introduce the same thing that we just showed you in Maya. Let's show it inside of Unreal so we can kind of keep everything at the same pace. So for Unreal to be launched, we have to launch Epic Game Launcher. Now inside here, we will be able to click on the side and get access to the Unreal Engine. So if I click this right here, I will be able to get access. Now, by default, you will see like either in an install or launch, or if you've already did it, to make sure that you've installed the right one. Or if you haven't installed yet, to make sure that you do install the right one, make sure that you go to library. And then right here, engine version, go ahead and click that. And when it asks you which version, like I can go ahead and let's just imagine that I haven't installed it. When I click that, I can actually pick my version out of this drop down. Inside of here, you should see 4.25. It may be either 0.3 or 0.4. If it only says 0.3, go ahead and install 0.3, and then you can update and we'll make it 0.4. But most of y'all should be able to do 4.25, 0.4 out of this menu. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove this, and we want to launch this. Now, as it's launching, let's go ahead and kind of talk about like the difference between a lecture and lab. All right, so when it's lecture, you want to make sure that you're taking notes, which I'm seeing a lot of people take notes. That is awesome right here. So the point of lecture is to take notes and then to ask questions. Now, specifically, what type of questions? Well, we want to ask questions that helps everybody, which means if you're trying to follow along with me and you ask the question of like, hey, when I click on this thing, that is a question that's very, very specific to you. Those are questions for lab, where you can get that more personalized help. Instead, the questions that we're looking in lab is, why would we do this? Why doesn't it open this way right here? Why would we add that? Why would we use this tool instead of that tool? Is there different ways of approaching this method right here? Those are questions that help everybody. So the best thing I can say is in lecture, you want to make sure that you're taking notes. You will have labs to ask those personalized questions when you are trying to do these on your own. All right, with that said, this is our Unreal project browser. So we're not going to pay too much attention about this because we will not be saving any programs or anything like that in Unreal right now. We will go over the whole like creating new projects and saving projects when we start working with it more in week 3. But the first thing that we're going to do is bring up a practice level that we can play around with. So you may not have these, which you should not have these because these were our last month's projects. Instead, this should be blank up here. But the main thing that we're going to do is go right here and click on games. Games. Once we click on games, we're going to go ahead and hit next. Inside of here, we're going to get a couple of templates. The main one that we're going to be using is blank right here. We want a blank template. We don't want any pre-made stuff or pre-made cameras or anything like that because these are set up for different game levels and they're already pre-programmed to do certain things. Instead, we want something that we can practice it. So we want blank. Next is the location that we want to save in. I'm not going to mess around with this, but right now you're going to see that it's going to default to your documents folder. That's perfectly fine. Default documents, that's fine. And then as far as project, you can name it test or anything like that. That doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, you're not going to be saving this. But for settings, we're going to leave it as blueprint. Maximum quality is perfectly fine. Ray trace disabled. Very important. Actually, I don't even think it will allow you to run ray tracing at this time. I don't think y'all have ray trace enabled AMD cards inside your laptops for most of y'all. But from there, we have desktop console. Every one of these right here is default, but you always want to double check to make sure that they're giving you these right here. The only thing that we're going to change and make sure that it's changed to the right thing is this right here. By default, it's with starter content. Instead, we want no starter content. Starter content is, it will look like 2 chairs and a table and like a little figurine on it. That's great for when if you're following along with tutorials that Unreal gives you. For us, we want that out of the way. We don't want to worry about that. So no starter content. All right, from there, now we can hit create. And now it's going to go through its second phase. So now it's building up all the folders and all the different elements of Unreal. Now, once it does that, I'm going to drag this to the right window. And let's go ahead and talk about its different elements. So first thing that we're going to talk about is up here. This is our top menu. So same kind of idea with Maya. We have our top menu up here. This is where we can get to file, open, new, all that different areas. Below that is our level tab. All right. That tab, and typically you're not going to have too many of these open. And actually it's going to be very rare that you have more than one of these open in this class. But when you get further into your degree program, you're going to probably have several one of these because of the notion of what Unreal is. When you have a game, unless it's a very short game, and hopefully not an expensive one, you're going to have more than one level, right? Well, the notion is inside Unreal, as we go into Maya and build our crates and our barrels and our cars and our different elements, we bring it to Unreal. And then from there, we will be able to lay it out in different levels. So we will have different levels inside of Unreal where we can lay stuff out. Those different tabs allows us to switch between different levels that we're working on and different elements that we're working on. All right. And again, please make sure that you keep your camera off. All right. I'll just drag this off to the side. All right. With that said, underneath there, we have our toolbar. Our toolbar is where we can get to certain options like save current. So we can change our different modes or go to our content browser, go to the marketplace, which let you know, marketplace is pretty awesome. Unreal gives you free stuff every month that allows you to kind of like populate levels. If you want to get into game art, it's pretty awesome to kind of go see. We can also play our level. So I can go right here, hit play and kind of move stuff around and have fun. We can also build different elements. But one thing that we're going to talk about before we start going to the different parts of the UI is let's try to make sure that this is actually running at a decent speed. So I'm going to go right here to settings. Inside of settings, I want to go to engine scalability, settings, engine scalability settings, and hit auto. What that is going to do is, and this is going to be like second nature for anybody who PC games, what happens when you PC game? You need to go in the settings and make sure that they're set to a settings that are optimized for your computer that will actually run properly. Same way with Unreal. We have to look at our specs, and then we'll pick the best settings for us to make sure that we're keeping the right level of quality and also speed. So again, if you're having issues with installing these software, make sure that you go to lab. Lab starts at 5 p.m. Eastern time today. Unless you're viewing this on Thursday, then it will happen on Friday. And this is why recordings and telling you dates is not that great on recordings. All right, I always have to think stuff out. All right, with that said, next is our modes. This is our modes panel. As we change our different modes over here, it will change the different elements over here. So right now we have it set to select mode. This is where we can get to the different assets that we can drag out into what is our viewport over here. So again, this is our modes panel. Next to that is our viewport. Same thing with the viewport with Maya. This is where we can see our 3D world. Next to that is our world outliner. In our world outliner, this is where we can see everything that's inside of our scene. So this is like the outliner inside of Maya. As we click on our different elements inside of our outliner, we will get our details tab. This is all the different settings. This is the real meat and potatoes of the different objects. This is where we can see not only where it's located in our world, but also how does it look? How is it going to run? What are the physics? What is the programmed elements on it? This is where we get to that. Like I said, with Unreal, we're going to be scratching the surface the same way that we're doing with Maya. Below that, we have our content browser. Our content browser is where we keep all the elements that we're going to be sticking inside of our level. So when we create barrels, when we create crates, when we make textures, when we have animations, if we have characters, all this stuff right here, they will live in this tab, because everywhere that I have a crate or a barrel inside my different levels, I'm not making a new one each time. Instead, I'm pulling from my content browser and dropping them where I need them to be. Now, this has a lot less windows than Unreal, than Maya. That's because there's a lot of back end to Unreal, and we're only seeing the visual elements. Actually, the simplest form of Unreal, that's what we're seeing right here. The coding part.
Hey, Jared, your audio has stopped.
This is ridiculous. All right. Hello, hello, hello. All right, I think we're back. All right, so if you missed what I just said, so I went over the outliner, which is a list of different things inside of our scene. The detail section is where we can get to the different elements that we can change on the objects that we set in our outliner. From there, we have our content browser. This is where we bring in the objects, the assets that we're going to use inside of our game. That's where they exist. So as we need to drag them out and populate our levels, that is where we import them in to be able to use inside of Unreal. Now this is making me very paranoid about like the batteries. All right, so with that said, this is the most simplest setup of Unreal. So don't be alarmed by the fact that it looks simple. It's hiding a lot of different elements away from us. So one of the key things is that we want to make sure that we are in the right UI though, because occasionally your UI will change based on your resolution. I know it sounds weird, but if you actually hook up to a smaller resolution, it may truncate or remove windows. So we want to make sure that we are all seeing the same UI by going right here to Windows. Actually, yeah, Window, load layout, default layout. And this will make sure that this is the default layout and show all the windows that is showing for me. And then also pop it over to the other monitor. All right. Did you have a question? Yep, at the very bottom. All right, so with that said, let's kind of catch up the last bit that we showed in Maya, which is if we go right here, how do we move around the camera? Well, if we wanted to, we could use the same hotkeys that we used for Maya, which is if I hold down Alt/Option, I can left mouse click and drag and orbit around. I can hold on Alt/Option and right mouse click and drag to dolly in and out, and Alt/Option, middle mouse click and drag to pan around. Now, that's perfectly fine, but really at the end of the day, you don't want to use other programs, hotkeys and functions in a different program. That can cause conflict, that can cause issues, and it's really just at the end of the day a crutch. So let's talk about how we move around using Unreal's way of moving around the camera. Now, just to let you know, Unreal was an engine that they built for the Unreal games. Everybody's heard of the Unreal games, right? Unreal Tournaments, and then the ones before that, Unreal, Unreal 2, all that. Well, they were PC games, which means we can, if we want, getting a little bit ahead of myself. First, we can hold down just left mouse click, and as I push forward, pull back, go left and right. This is allowing me to walk around. This is called walking. Next is if I hold down middle mouse click and only middle mouse click, I can pan around. So I don't even have to hold down Option. And then right mouse click and drag will allow me to look. So there was walking on left mouse click and right click to look. But going back to their Unreal roots, if I hold down any one of these mouse buttons, so if I hold down my right one, that looks around, I can use W as in Wally to go forward, S to go backwards, A to strafe to the left, and D to strafe to the right. Also, I can hit Q to go down and E to go up. So W forward, S backwards, A strafe to the left, D strafe to the right, Q to go down, E to go up. And exactly like PC gaming. So they implemented first-person shooting WASD keys along with the mouse into their camera control because they figured out that would be the most intuitive way, which they're right. It makes sense. We're so used to it. It makes sense. Now, with that said, that is the user interface, and that's how we move around objects inside of Unreal. I mean, not objects, but our camera. Now let's go right here, hop back over. I'm gonna go ahead and, can I quit my VPN? I better not be hooked up to my VPN still. That would be the kicker. Quit. All right, so back in Maya. Once it loads. All right, so one of the things I'm going to take a little quick segue is let's go ahead and hop over to the actual section that we're in, because now we kind of prefaced all the different elements that we need to talk about that gets us to where we need to be with our lecture activities. So I'm going to go right here and load this up. If it ever loads up, there we go. All right. And I'm going to go to Intro to 3D. If it ever loads up. And then we're going to go to Introduction to 3D. All right, so we're going to scroll down. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is our lecture activities. So the first lecture activities that we're going to be doing today is we're going to have 5 different lecture activities, which is essentially we're going to have stacking, where we're going to take different objects and just stack them on top of each other. Something very, very basic. Some of y'all may find it very almost childish, but this is just different activities to force y'all to use not only your camera, but also different tools that we're about to talk about in a second. Stacking, and then next diorama. You're going to do one in Maya, and you're going to do one in Unreal. So that means one stacking in Maya, one stacking in Unreal, and one diorama in Maya, and one diorama in Unreal. I will show you the stacking inside of Maya, and then I will show you the diorama in Unreal. After I do those, I'm going to ask whether or not y'all need me to show you them in the other program, but really at the end of the day, it's going to be the same exact methods. All right. Now, with that done, let's go right here and let's bring up a object. Now, we'll talk about these objects and the different purposes of them a little bit later, but let's just go ahead and click on that cube. And right now I'm in the polygon modeling tab. So if I click that right there, I will get access to that. But this right here is my object. And I'm actually going to make one or two. All right, so first thing that we're going to notice is by default, this tool should be up right here. This is our selection tool. Our selection tool will allow us to select objects. So right now we're seeing nothing with outline whatsoever. That means that it's not selected. What's up? Oh, if you go right here to get my outliner open, we just click on this little box right here. This will open and close it. All right. Now, what we're seeing right here is our objects deselected. When I select on one, you will see that it is green. If I click and drag over them and do a marquee select, you will see that there is one object that is green and white. So first, if there's no outline, that means that they are deselected. When they have an outline, that means that they are selected. Green means that it is the most active selection. That means that is the lead selection. White means that it is selected, but is not the lead selection. Essentially, lead is essentially the last one that was selected. So we have selected, and then we have lead selected. Now, with that, I go right here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. We'll talk about how we remove things a little bit later. But with this selected, now we can apply different types of transformations to it. First, if we click this, this will bring up our manipulator. Other programs call it a gizmo. Other programs also call it handles. Even Maya refers to these three different ways. One of the things that you're going to learn that with a lot of 3D programs over the years, especially with them absorbing other smaller softwares, they will absorb their lingo. So even the same program, you will hear the same thing be called multiple different things. But manipulator, gizmo, handles, I've even heard this called the mover, but I don't think that was the professional word for it. But the fact is that this is how we can translate an object. When we translate an object, we are moving it to different locations on the X, Y, and Z. Same way if I pick something up and move it to a different location. Now, with this manipulator, we have different ways of doing that. We can, right here, select just one of these arrows, which if we look at these arrows, their color is corresponding to the same color on our compass. So right here, we can see that Z is blue. That means that this axis is the Z axis. X is red, this is the X axis, and this right here, Y is green, this is the Y axis. But if I grab one of these axes, I can perform a one-dimensional move. That means I'm only moving it on one dimension. That means that it's locked to that dimension. It's not moving in any of the other ones, only in the one that I have selected. I can grab this, move that in that dimension, grab this, move it in that dimension. In between these arrows, we will see little squares. These squares right here are our two-dimensional moves. So if I grab this one right here, this will allow me to move it in the X and the Y. This will allow me to move it. Oh, no, this was the Z and the Y. This is the X and the Y. And then this is the Z and the X right here. So that is our two-dimensional move. And if you're noticing, these are colored based on the axis that they're not moving in. So if I click this one right here, since it's blue, that means that it's moving in all the other axes except for the blue axis with it, which is the Z. So that is our two-dimensional. And then last but not least, we have the square. Now we'll talk about the importance of the square on Friday, but clicking and dragging on it will unlock 3 axes. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice, if I bring up my channel box right here in my sidebar, we can see that right here when I start moving stuff around, it is updating these numbers in this translate. So that's our 3-dimensional move. If I grab this right here, you will notice that it's only changing 1 axis. And then if I grab this square right here, it's only changing 2 axes. So 1, 2, 3. Next is my rotate. If I go right here and click on my rotate, this will allow me to turn my object along an axis. So essentially, it's going to control my yaw, pitch, and roll. I know the names. Do not question me on which axes they are. Even I don't really know that. But the fact is that now I can go right here, click on one ring. This will be my 1-dimension rotate. And again, the colors correspond to the axis that we're rotating it around. If I click this blue outer line right here, in 2 dimensions. Now, if you look right here, it's going to do all 3, but we're doing it along a 2-dimensional plane, which is based off of how we're looking at it. And then last but not least, if I go right here and grab anywhere in the middle, this is my grab in the middle, and just start going gonzo with it.
Circle.
2-dimension, and it's based off of how we look. So if we start moving around, we can see how that circle is just kind of staying, in our line of sight. And it's now only rotating it based off of how we look at it. Last but not least, we have our scale. Now, depending on how we use this, we will have to use 2 different terms. First is scale. Scale is when we make something bigger or smaller. The key word that we need to add on to that is when we scale, we uniformly make it bigger or smaller. That means if we scale uniformly, which is smaller. That means if we scale observing its proportions, nothing's getting longer, nothing is doing the next word, which is if we only scale it in 1 or 2 axes at a time, we're not scaling it. We're using another S word. Can anybody guess what that S word is? Stretch is close. Yes. What? Skewing. Yes. So yeah, we can do both stretching and skewing. All right. But essentially, we're changing the proportions of our object. This seems like it's obvious, but it is important that we understand the difference between scaling and skewing, because there's times where we will need a skew, and then there's times that we will need to scale, specifically when we get into one major thing, which is when we get into UVs and we want to maintain their layout, we will need to make sure that we are scaling, not skewing. So there is no skewing for translate or rotate because we're not changing proportions. They are incapable. Yes, yes. The 3D cube is the only way, to maintain, proportions. Meanwhile, if we do in 2 dimensions or 1 dimension, then we will change the proportions. Yep, exactly. Okay. So, hi. Oh, no worries. Okay. So anyway, that is our main 3. I like to call them our cardinal movements because there's no other way to do anything inside of 3D without rotating, moving, or what we like to say translate or scaling. Now, we have these right here, these toolbars right here, where if you want to scale something, you go click the scale icon. Or if you need to rotate something, hit the rotate icon. At this point, don't ever do that again. Don't ever reach over to that toolbar to grab any of these tools. Instead, let's go ahead and start forming our own hotkey cheat sheet, which to also let you know, if you want a hotkey cheat sheet, you go down to our resource area, Maya hotkeys, Unreal hotkeys. If you want to download those, go for it. Now, we did get a question from somebody saying like, hey, do we have the Mac version of these? I'll let you know, for the most part, Maya's hotkeys and Unreal's hotkeys, they're the same on both Windows and Mac. The only thing that may change is instead of control on some of these, it's command on Mac. But even Maya doesn't even really pay attention to that. So with that said, our first hotkeys that we're going to use is going to be W. W as in Wally. W as in Wally will be our translate. Can I customize my hotkeys? Honestly, I would suggest no. I would not change any of the hotkeys on them, because one, if you're changing hotkeys without knowing exactly why you're doing it, or you may run into an issue where you may remove something that you need. Two, if you change your hotkeys too much, you're going to pretty much floor the instructor that you're going to ask questions of next, because we are used to the hotkeys for the program. So I would say until you become an industry professional, don't mess around with your hotkeys. Now you can make your own hotkeys for certain things, but I would not alter already made hotkeys. All right, so W is translate. Next to that is our E key, which is rotate. E as in echo, rotate. And then R as in Ralph, as is scale. Yes, I know, when it makes sense if R was rotating. We're not getting into that. All right, but WER, translate, rotate, scale, which if we look at something, we skipped over one button. We got WER, but we skipped over Q. Q is our marquee select tool. Now you're probably going like, well, why do we need a hotkey for that? Well, the thing is that not only does it bring up our marquee select tool, but by hitting Q, we drop our current tool, which is important because our cursor can look the same on different tools, but have different functionalities. Think of it this way right here. If I was to go pick up a baby, I would definitely want to drop the chainsaw before I do that. Same way here, when you're modeling on your stuff, you may want to drop the tool when you are trying to go select stuff in the background. So that's why it's important to understand Q, as in Queen, drops the tool. So let's go right here. With our newfound knowledge, what I want you to do is pick 5 different objects out of this row right here. So we essentially have a selection of 6. So let's go ahead and make 6 different objects. I'm going to skip over this one because, well, these two, because they're just flat. They're annoying. So what we want to do is, using our newfound knowledge of how to move around the camera and how to move around our objects and using the hotkeys, we're just going to stack these. Now, what I'm going to say is, you know, like, how many do I have there? I have 6, so I can get rid of 1. But what we want to do is just stack them on top of each other and use this time to like play around with the scale, the rotate. Don't just have them like one right on top of the other. That's a little bit boring. And also use this time to kind of play around with the different objects. So key things that I don't want to see is just have them cleanly just stacked on top of each other. And also I don't want to see 5 cubes stacked on top of each other. That's just a really long peg. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right here. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start playing around with this, using E on my keyboard to start rotating this. Select this and rotate, and maybe even scale this up a little bit. Now, it's a little bit hard to see what's going on, so I can now either move around my camera like so, or to help me, I can go right here and click on that four-view to bring up my elements. So again, this is my top view, this is my front view. I can see the name of the cameras by looking at the bottom right here. So top, front, side. And this will help me maneuver stuff around. So I'm gonna make sure that this is kind of sitting on the ground. Now, like how I said that at the origin of our grid, that's where our axes start. It's a little bit harder to see on our 2D view. But if we look, we see that we're alternating between a thin line, and then we have these thick lines right here. Those are our origin lines. Those are our axes. That's where the X, Y, and Z begins. And usually where the Y begins, that's usually our ground. So I'm just gonna bring this up. So it's just on top of that. We don't have to, but it does look better. Now I'm just going to bring this over, make sure that they're touching using my other views. Now, occasionally I will need to see a bigger view of my object. So, it's nice to have my four views, but sometimes I may need to make one bigger. So to do that, if I put my cursor over the window that I want to expand, like let's say I want to expand my front. I'll put my cursor over it and tap my space bar. Tap. So space bar, and just tap it. This will allow me to bounce between my different windows. So I'm going to bring this up, keep on stacking. And using my different window. Different windows to help me with that. If you don't like it, you just select it and hit delete on your keyboard. All right. Now, let's kind of finish this up. All right, I am going to have to go get the battery charger from a cubicle after lecture is done. All right, so we're going to finish this up right here. I'll go ahead and just kind of move that. All right, so, and then move it to here. So they're all making contact. And now I have these all stacking on top of each other. Now, before we do anything else, let's talk about how we are looking at these objects. So we talked about how we moved around the camera using Alt/Option, and then our left mouse click or right mouse click and our middle mouse click to do any of those. Then we talked about how we move around our objects, which is using the translate, rotate, scale, or WER in that state. But there's also different ways to view our objects. So first thing that we're looking at right now, see how we have almost a skin on our object. That skin is something that we call shaded mode. Shaded, S-H-A-D-E-D, which is essentially Maya is giving our objects kind of a skin. So that way we can perceive depth. To see that, that is the 5 key. 5. Next to that, we can hit 4, the number 4, and this will bring up what we call wireframe. The wireframe mode allows us to see the wires that make up our object, the skeletal structures. This is how Maya sees our objects. Actually, we'll talk about a little bit later what Maya actually sees. But the main thing is that our 2 modes that we're going to be looking at right here is wireframe, which is 4, which allows us to see our objects, and then 5, which is shaded mode, which allows us to see depth. But with that said, that's our first lecture activity. Now, before we take a screenshot of this, I'm going to explain the same thing inside of Unreal. Now, I'm not going to stack the whole entire thing. Everybody understands moving around the camera, moving around the objects, and just stack them on top of each other. But inside of here, so you never understood wireframe. So one, it's a little bit, it's a more efficient way of looking at our objects. So stuff is not having to spend that much time being rendered in real time by the program. But 2, sometimes we need to see the structure of the object or be able to see through it. So think of it this way right here. So when we model a car, 1, we need to be able to see pictures of the car. And that allows us to see depth, see the highlights, see the shadows. But then we need blueprints, which is the line curvature of our object. And it's the same way with wireframe. Sometimes we need to see the structures that make up our objects to make sure that they are being arranged properly. So it's not like the poly count. Their polygon count can affect the wireframe. But that's it. Let's go right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of bring out. Don't bring that out. Let's see. Let's bring out a cube. So to bring out a cube, all I have to do is just grab cube and then just drag it out over here. But to move stuff around, we can either click translate right here, rotate right there, or scale. Or luckily enough, the hotkeys are W, E, and R. So same as Maya. All right, so with that said, what you're going to do is pick out 5 of these objects. Now, there's not much of a selection, so you're going to have to reuse one. So we have cube, we got sphere, we got cylinder, we have cone, we got plane. Once you're done stacking them, what we're going to do is take a screenshot. So for our screenshots, those are your submissions for your lecture activity. What we want to do is, inside of Maya, we want to make sure that we can clearly see your activity. So both in Maya and Unreal. So when you get done with stacking in both Maya and Unreal, realize stacking is 2 images. You want to zoom in enough so we can see it, but not crop it out. Also, you don't want to be too far away from your object, and also you don't want to be off center. So something like this. Next, we want to take a screenshot of the entire program, not just the element that we're trying to see. Now, to help us frame up, we can select our object and hit F on the keyboard, F, as in Frank. And that will try to frame up on our object. But now, with these deselected, I'm going to go right here and hit Command Shift 4. And this will allow me to marquee select where I want the screenshot to be, the entire screen. So that way it looks like that. And this is my what? When you take a screenshot on a Mac, it's going to save to your desktop. So there it is right there. And I'm going to try to open this up again. That way I can actually save it. So file, save as, or actually rename. And we're going to name this last name underscore first name underscore stacking Maya. So underscore. And now we have our first two lecture activities. What's up? Oh, that's a good thing to bring up. All right, so it's good that somebody actually brought that up right there. So in Unreal, one thing that we haven't covered is when you move stuff around, one of the things that you're going to notice is that it's not as smooth as it is inside of Maya. And that's because by default, it has something called snapping turned on. Snapping, which means it is snapping to each one of these grid units as I move it up and down. We'll talk about more about snapping on Friday. But to turn it off, we can click this grid. This grid will turn off snapping for movement. This right here, this angle, clicking that off will turn off snapping for rotation. And this one right here will turn off snapping for scale. All right. No, it needs to be a screenshot, not a recording. It is mandatory to be a screenshot. And also, you will lose points if it doesn't match our criteria. So it may seem that these are just copy and paste right here, where it's saying like, the screenshot guidelines, make sure that Unreal is maximized, that the viewport is big enough so we can see the activity, make sure that the activity is easily viewable in all angles and framed up in position so we can actually give it credit. It may seem like we're saying the same thing over and over again, but make sure that you read that because that is not always the case. And this is where you will either receive points or lose points. So with our lecture activities, there's two things that we have to make sure of. One, did you do the lecture activity? Did you do the goal that we are looking for? And two, did you follow the instructions? That's because when you work out in the industry, those two elements are two sides of the same coin. If you have awesome artwork, but cannot follow instructions, then your artwork is useless. Can follow instructions. You may not be out of a job, but you may not make it that far. So making sure that we have both sides covered is important. And not so much the awesome artwork. You do what they tell you to do. If they tell you to like model Optimus Prime and you model a cow instead, yeah, they'll definitely be angry. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move on to our diorama. So what we want to do is, with our basic objects, we want to go ahead and model out a few things. Very, very basic. So we're going to model out a ground, which by default, we get that already inside Maya and Unreal. But then we want to do a house with a roof, a tree, a fence, and a snowman, something really basic. Now, those are the main things that we're looking for. You have to have one of those elements at least one thing to represent each one of those elements. Now, you can keep it basic. I've seen people build entire neighborhoods. As long as you meet our bare minimum requirements, you can go nuts. So. Well, you're not going to be doing any real modeling. We're just going to keep these basic, but I've seen people build, instead of a house, build a mansion. So you can have some fun if you want to, but for the most part, let's go ahead and start building the house. In this case right here, I'm going to just make a cube. And then I'm going to go and grab a cone. And that's going to be my makeshift roof. So we're just going to go right here to scale that out. No, we can do this all. You don't need to make or save any of these activities because they're just very, very basic. Drag and drop. So there's our roof. Move that around. Next, let's go ahead and make our snowman. So what I'm going to do is go right here, drag out a sphere, kind of move that up, probably scale that down. One of the cool things inside of Unreal is that we can use these little contact shadows right here to kind of keep an eye on our object. A lot of our hotkeys between Unreal and Maya overlap. So if I select this and hit F on the keyboard, that will frame up same way as it does in Maya. But now, instead of me just making another sphere, what I want to do is hold down Option and drag up on my manipulator, and that will make a copy of this. So holding down Option will allow me to drag out a new copy. Now I'm letting go and just scaling this down. Again, change between rotate, scale, and translate is the same hotkeys as Maya, so W, E, and R. And then holding down Option again, I'm going to drag out another one. Make this a little bit smaller.
Scale it uniformly.
It's usually a little bit obscured, skewed, or bleh. I can't even say the right word. Anyway, so right here, it will be the center square to scale it uniformly. That center one right there. And you will see it highlight all of these right here when you hover over it. Make it a tiny head. All right. Next, we're going to do the tree. So I'm going to go right here, drag out this cylinder. That down. And drag out cone. And do the same thing. We're just going to scale this out. Bring that over. Bring that down so we can actually see what's going on. And I'm hitting W, Q, and E to move my camera up and down. Holding down Option and dragging up. And then Option again, drag out one last one. All right. Now, last but not least, we need a fence. So I'm just going to grab another cube. Does it have to be a Christmas tree? No, I've seen people just take a bunch of spheres and kind of stick them together and just kind of make kind of a blobby tree. It's just we're essentially doing the modeling equivalent of like kindergartner's drawing for the first time. This is more to get you kind of like something fun to do, while also forcing you to use the camera controls and the movement tools. Now, it can be a different tree as long as you have something that is visibly looks like a tree. We could have just stopped at just a cone, probably. Just one cone. I'm going to use that option right now. Actually, I'm going to hit E to bring up my rotate tool. And then I'm going to go and hold down Option. And with Option held down, I can rotate out another one. The duplicate works on all of them. And I'm going to just move this around until, there's -90. Sweet. That's close enough for me. Pop quiz. How many degrees are in a circle? Yes. 360. Yes. So keep that in mind, because like we have 180, which means it turns around. We have 9 degrees, and we can use these degrees, these milestones for our degrees, to help us figure out where and how we're turning our objects. But now I can go right here, and I'm going to hold down Option, drag it out another one. It's the bare minimum that we have to have right there. We have our snowman, we have our fence, we have our house with a roof, and we have our tree. Now, as long as you have those elements, and along with our ground, which remember, Unreal gives us a ground. Maya will not give you a ground. You will have to create one, which I'll show you in a second. But that is our diorama for Unreal. So at this point, we're just going to frame up on it. It's looking good. And I'm going to hit Command-Shift-4. And save this out. And then that is our screenshot for the diorama for Unreal. And hopefully it lets me rename it. There we go. So last name underscore first name underscore diorama. Unreal. All right. So we did our diorama inside of Unreal. Let's pop back over here to my Maya. If I've already done with my stacking and I've already taken my screenshot, I can go ahead and remove that and do my diorama inside of here. And again, we got to make sure that we have a ground, a snowman, a tree, a house, and a fence. Well, one of the things that's different about Maya and that Unreal gave you for free is in Maya, we don't have a ground. So we need to at least have a ground. So to do that, I'm going to go right here, this little square. This will give me a plane. We're trapped. And with that plane, we can scale that out. And there's our plane. Now, I'm not going to do the whole diorama inside Maya. I'm just going to show you how we can duplicate stuff really quickly in here. But let's go ahead and what? So all I did was click on this plane. So again, I know there's a temptation to try to do these lecture activities during the lecture right now, but instead make sure that you're kind of taking notes instead, because I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that. I'm faster at this than y'all. And for the length of time we have for lecture, we don't have time for everybody to stay on task inside of lecture. That's what lab is for. So when you have issues like that, or you're trying to do these right here, that's best suited for lab and the Discord help sessions. Instead, you want to use this time to write down, like, any hotkeys that I go over, any methods that I'm showing, and then also ask questions on, like, like, hey, can I use this instead? Does it have to be this type of tree? That kind of thing right there. That definitely does help. Now, from here, let's go ahead and make the sphere for our snowman. And with the snowman, now click that sphere and move it around. Now I'm gonna put it right here on the edge. Now, who remembers how do we frame up on an object? F on the keyboard. That will frame our camera on the object right here. And now, instead of having to create another sphere by going up there and making my arm tired and my pointing finger tired and clicking on that sphere, for me to duplicate this. And this is going to be one of those things where it's going to be different names, but they're the same exact thing. We can duplicate something, we can clone something. Both of them are the same exact thing. They're just called two different things for some reason. Consistency inside Maya is really not a thing. So to clone with one of my cardinal movement tools up, one of my manipulators up, I can hold down Shift on the keyboard. Shift. And when I hover over my manipulator, we will see the word clone. Well, at least if you're like closer to the screen, you'll see the word clone. It's a little bit harder to see when it's on the projector. But now we can drag this out, scale, hit W, bring this back. Holding down Shift, I'm going to clone out this right here and scale that down. And now we have our snowman. So very quickly, we were able to make that snowman. Now you can go a little bit more advanced. I have seen people add, like, the eyes, the nose, even like make some like wonky arms out of, like, boxes. Go for it, have fun. The only thing is, I'm just want to say, it can be very easy to roll 10 hours in this, but also realize that you have other projects that you have to do as well too. So make sure that you time management. But yeah, have fun with this. But I'm not going to do the rest of the diorama, but does everybody understand that you have to do diorama in Maya as well? All right, so we will take a screenshot of this, the same notion, make sure that you're framed up on it. We can see everything, and it's of the entire screen. Now, it's important that you make sure that if you have any questions about these screenshots, before you turn them in, you can ask, hey, does this look right? All right. Because that can help people, especially posting in the Discord, just like, hey, does this look right? Or ask questions in lab. Because here's the thing, you may be the brave one to ask that question while 9 other people were not, just didn't even have the, didn't even know that they had that question. That's the best way to phrase it right there. So, but here's the thing with the screenshots. Improperly submitted screenshots get automatically 25% off counted. So missing one of the requirements of actually submitting this will count it off 25% per screenshot. Now, with that said, again, we have all the guidelines right here. Next, when you submit them, make sure that you're using the photo icon. So right here, if we go into completion, you want to use this icon right here, that image icon that will allow you to upload it as an image. If you drop it in here, it will attach it as a file, requiring us to download it. So make sure that you use the image icon. All right. Now, with that said, this is where, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and close down Unreal. We're not going to really talk about how we save in Unreal and open stuff in Unreal, because We're not even going to touch Unreal again until the end of week 3. So that's where I will introduce that right there. But now is when we need to start talking about how we create files, save files, how we work with different project structures, and then also our save environments. So this is where we're kind of like tying stuff up. Like I said, this is the longest one of the longer lectures. So we got diorama and sure. All right. So with that said, I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna hit new. Actually, I'm gonna save this right here. We'll get to that in a second. But all right. Any questions? All right. So let's talk about your environment when you're learning this stuff. So when I say environment, I mean actually several different things. First is the environment that you're processing this information. It's important that you pick an environment that is comfortable and is quiet because there is a lot of material. Like I said, one of the reasons why, and it always sounds like I'm being a hard ass when I tell people not to do the lecture activities while I'm doing them. It's not because I'm like, hey, you need to pay attention. It's just that when you're working in Maya while I'm explaining stuff, if you haven't noticed yet, Maya is very A, B, C, D. If you miss one step, it will prevent you from moving forward. And if you're working in Maya while I'm talking, you may miss that step. So it's important to watch first, write stuff down, and then try to follow along on the second step. Because if you watch first, you're aware of what's coming next. So you have like a little bit of preview of what's going to happen. So that's why it's important to try to view this in the most quiet venue as possible so you can process this information and take notes. So that's my first one. Second one, your second environment is your computer itself. One, make sure that you learn how to use computer. Most of y'all probably do. And it may sound like mean, but we are getting into the generation that a lot of people did not have a computer. And instead, they had phones, they had iPads. But as you can see, computers are completely different from those right there. So if you're not used to computers, use this time, get used to them. Second, these are your computers. These are your main tools on doing the assignments, which means please do not let them become your gaming machine. Please do not let them become your family's computer, your little brother or your son or daughters or whatever. Don't let them play around with it because you're in charge of these machines. If they're unable to do your assignments, then it results in you not getting graded for those assignments. So you want to make sure that you're keeping these work tools first. Second, make sure that you're getting comfortable with your computer and able to find your files. One of the key things is that you're going to be turning in your assignments, which means you have to find your work. If you can't find your work, you can't turn it in. So one of the things I like to do, and I'm going to be doing this on both the Windows and the Mac as we get to it, I like to make my own little area that is not the desktop. Please do not be that person that saves everything on the desktop. One, that's very, very cluttered. Two, the desktop is the easiest place where other people can get to, which means it's the easiest place to accidentally delete stuff. You know, it's okay to delete a couple images of funny cats, but deleting the project that you worked the last 40 hours on. So instead, what I want to do is I'm going to go into my Finder and I'm going to go to my Documents folder. Inside my document folder, I like to create a 3DF folder. Now, you do not have to follow my method of creating files. If you have your own method, as long as it's organized and it helps you keep organized, go for it. This is just my way. Inside of here, I like to make a 3DF folder. And then, as you can see, I already had the stuff from last month. I'm going to go right here and hit delete on that. But inside of 3DF, I'm going to make a week 1, a week 2, a week 3, and a week 4, week 1. So, and it may sound like I'm being super organized, but if you think that, you're probably not being organized enough. It doesn't hurt to be super organized. Well, I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me do like 90 different folders, but inside those week folders, I will have like, you know, lecture 1, lecture 2, and then like whatever competency. So for this one right here, I'm going to have a lecture 1. Now, when we come back on Friday, all of these will be all set up, but now we have that lecture 1. So now I have a location that I know that I'm in 3DF, I'm in week 1, we're in lecture 1, and this is important because we're about to start talking about how we save and handle stuff inside of Maya. So when we save inside of Maya, there's 2 main things that we have to be worried about. First is when we work with Maya, especially if we have textures, which we'll explain what textures are. You may already know what we're talking about when we're talking about textures, but when we have color, when we have animation, when we have audio, when we have video inside of Maya, that stuff is not actually inside of Maya. Instead, Maya is only sourcing it, which means it's playing the video, but it's actually just pointing at that video and then playing it over here, which means if we move that video, then Maya's pointing at nothing, and that means that video no longer plays. Now, this may sound like a headache because certain projects will have hundreds and hundreds of textures, animations, videos, dynamic caching, renders, all that stuff right there tied to it. And it's probably like mind-boggling going like, well, how do I organize all that? Well, you don't. Instead, Maya has something called a project system. A project system. To get to it or to create one, we need to go to File. Everybody keeps on saying they can't hear me, and it makes me worried. All right. So go right here, File, Project Window. This will bring up our project window, allowing us to make a project system. Now, what is a project system? It's a file structure, a folder structure that Maya can understand. So by default, what we want to do is go right here, and I'm going to click New. This will allow me to name my project and then set a location for it. So go right here, File, and I'm going to name this Test. And then I'm going to hit that folder and pick a location for it. I'll go right here, Documents. I created my 3DF folder. There's my week 1. There's my lecture 1. And then I'm going to hit Select. So now it's going to make a project system named Test, and then it's going to locate it in the lecture 1 folder that I made within my week 1 within my 3DF. Hit Accept. When I did that, if I go right here, I will go in the lecture 1. There's my test. Inside there, I will see a bunch of folders. These folders are there, and they're generated by Maya. Maya will be looking for specific things inside of there. But one of the key things, you're probably going like, well, I could have created a bunch of folders, which that would have been a pain in the ass to make that many folders each time I need to make a project. But even if we wanted to do that, it would not work. That's because there's one element that we have to let Maya create for us. Is this big guy right there, that workspace mail. For Maya to understand a project system, it needs to have a brain. That workspace mail tells Maya what is going on and how to work it. That is the brain of a project. Without that, our project system will not work, and it will not load anything up. And we cannot create that ourselves. We have to use the project setup for that. Now, that's our project system. So now, once we have a project, we can now start saving. So to save, we go right here to File, Save Scene As. When we save something inside of Maya, it's called a scene, a Maya scene. When we do that, we can see that one, we're in our test folder, and then it automatically goes to the scenes folder. So now it knows like, hey, I'm a project. Oh, he's trying to save a scene. Let me go to the scenes folder. Down here, I can name the scene. This is going to be Diorama 001. Now, a couple things about that name. First, it contains no spaces. And actually, probably, I don't know if anybody noticed when I was making the file names for all the folders or naming all the folders, I didn't have any spaces in those either. That's because spaces can break our 3D programs. And not even break them, like they can just flat out just not work with them, all right? Everybody's heard of a small company called Pixar, right? I always make that joke and usually people answer. But the fact is that yes, Pixar makes a render engine called RenderMan. RenderMan is amazing, beautiful. All the movies are made with it. If you have a space in any one of your file names, it will not render your, I was about to say your shit. I still said it. It will not render your stuff. And that's not by a bug, that's by design. Spaces really are not part of our programming on any of these programs. So we have to make sure that we don't have any spaces in any of our names. Another thing is that we don't want any special characters. Instead, what we can do is we can either do underscores for spaces or camel casing. So if I say, if I want this to be Mr. Snowman, I can do capital M, R, and then capital S, Snowman. But the key thing is that spaces anywhere can break the functionality. So get out of the habit of putting spaces in any of your file names and your folder names. Next is, you probably noticed that we have that 001. Can anybody guess what that is? Yes, exactly, version number, which brings us to the importance of saving in increments. When you save something, you want to make sure that every time you do a new save, you make a new save. So when I go and work on this, and you need to get in the habit of, one, I never use me as an indicator on when to save. I spend most of my time talking. If something actually broke on this right here, take me about like a minute or two to get back to where we need be. You, probably not. So instead, what you need to do is, if you have a timer on your phone, you got a timer or anything like that, set it to 10, 20 minutes. Every 10, 20 minutes, save out a new version. That's because if you just save over the same version over and over again, what happens when that version gets corrupted? Lose everything. But if you save in versions, if one of them gets corrupted, you lose all the work from that time to your prior save, which is a lot less work. Because, I'm going to actually exit out of this for a second. We're seeing all this right here. We're seeing our snowman, we're seeing a plane, and all that stuff right there. Maya doesn't see this. This is what Maya is actually seeing. Node editor. Maya is a node-based modeler, which means that little block right there is just a bunch of math that we connect up to another block with a bunch of math and add modifiers. All we're doing is just adding math to Maya. All it takes is a couple numbers being off and you lose everything. That's why it's important to save in increments, to safeguard against that. And we will come back to this node editor and how it's important to delete what we like to call history. But we'll talk about that more on Friday. But instead, we're gonna go right here, file, save as. And from there, we're gonna name this Mr. Snowman 001. Now down here, we can pick a different type of how we want to save it. We can either do Maya ASCII or Maya binary. Either one's perfectly fine. ASCII saves it in ASCII characters, which means we can actually read it. Maya binary will save it in machine code. ASCII, you can actually open it up on text document, and if you need to make some backend opens faster, and it's a smaller file size. The main key thing is that if you save as one file type, you will not be able to later on save it as a different one. So you want to make sure that you make your binary. Now, if you're curious why you would want to do a Maya ASCII and the little hacks that you can do to it, go to the lab. They'll be more than happy to tell you. All right. So with that said, we're going to go right here. And now it's saved. We can see right here, it's saved user documents 3DF week 1, lecture 1, test scenes, Mr. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So that's how we create a project, which we don't need to create a project every time that we need to save. Actually, I would say you'll have a project probably for each main week. But we'll talk about that more as we get to those individual parts. Now let's talk about how we open up a project and how we do stuff. So if you want to open up a Word doc, what do? Yeah, just double click on the Word doc, right? Which is understandable. It's a Word document. It opens up the program and it opens up that document. We don't do that with Maya. We don't, because we got to realize that Maya is a big boy. It is a big program. It's a lot of information that's loading up. And out of that, it is not only just a program that you're loading up. You're loading up tons of plugins as well too. We do not want to add our scene onto that list of to-do list that is trying to get through. So the proper way to open up your projects is first, open up Maya. Let it open up completely, like I just did. We opened up Maya first. I did not double click on a scene. Instead, I went right here. I opened up Maya. Next, we have to set our project. Set our project. We got to let it know what project that we're working on. So we're going to go right here, File, go to Open. And setting project is so important that there is, inside of Open, there's a Set Project button. We're going to click that. It's going to open up another window. Now, we could have went right here, inside of File, there's a Set Project at the bottom. But I like to just go ahead and save me a step, go into Open, go to Set Project. And what we want to do is click on the main project directory. So we have that test. How can we tell that's the main project directory? Well, if we open it up, immediately we can see that workspace melt. So click on the main directory, hit Set. And then from there, we can open up the scene. Now, I could have skipped all that right there and just clicked on the snowman, and it would probably have worked because there's not much going on. But let's get your last lecture activity. So I'm going to go right here. And this is going to be your homework right here, which is putting together this Mr. Potato Head. So I'm going to go right here, download the Mr. Potato Head. That's on download to my documents, my downloads. Now, keep in mind that this download is a zip file. We have to uncompress it. To do that on Windows, double click on it. On Mac, same thing, just double click on it. And we'll expand. We got this right here. There's our Mr. Potato Head uncompressed. I'm going to hit Command C to copy. I need to clean out my downloads folder. I'm going to go to my week 1. Lecture 1, and drop it in here. So Command V to paste. So we unzipped it after we downloaded it. It gave us a project. And now, just to prove my point, let's go right here. I'm going to go ahead, double click on the Mr. Potato Head. Don't save. All right, so first, we need to put all this Lego Man stuff together. So right now, what mode are we seeing our object in? Wireframe, exactly, which is what hotkey? 4, yes, 4. Now, we want to see it in shaded mode, which is what? 5, yes. All right, so we got it all in pieces. I want you to put it back together. I want it to be scaled proportionally and positioned proportionally and correctly, which means, let me go right here, bring up quad view. Probably don't be pretty hard if I don't give you pictures to kind of follow, right? Well, if we look right here, we're seeing these X's right there. That means there were pictures there. Maya knows there's supposed to be something there, but it doesn't know where to look. And that's where we failed at the opening of the project. We double clicked on the file, it opened up, but now all it knows what's inside the file. It doesn't know that it's part of a project. It doesn't know that it has images tied to it. So instead, let's go through the proper way. Let me go ahead and close this. Don't save. Let me reopen up Maya. And this is also another reason why you want to kind of watch ahead. Instead of following along with me, watch ahead and then go back and work on stuff. I will purposely screw stuff up so that we have a learning experience. And then I'm like, all right, I always get like a couple of hate emails going like, why do you waste like 20 minutes of my time by like doing it wrong? And then I had to redo everything. Well, that's part of the lecture. That's part of the learning experience. So from there, we're gonna go to Maya. We're gonna load up Maya. From there, once our beach ball goes away, our pinwheel, we're gonna go right here, the file, open. And then we're going to go to set project. Click on the main directory. Again, we can tell like it's the main directory by if we go into that directory, we see the workspace mail. So main directory, we're going to select and hit set. And then we can go to scenes, potato head, don't save. Now, when we go back to our quad view, looky what we have. It can now see that we have a project. It knows that that project is pointing at images, which are inside that project, and it loads that stuff up for us. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but when we quadruple the amount of reference that we have, and then add in textures, animations, cache dynamics, fluids, all that kind of stuff right there, you can see how setting your project will save you time. All right, last two things, and then we're going vamoose. Vamoose. Say words wrong all the time. All right, so this is crucial. This actually will make up like 90% of my emails from students this week, actually for the next couple of weeks, which is where are my images? Why aren't things appearing this way? All that. It will come down to 9% of them is because you missed a step in that setting your project and then opening up the scene. It's important. All right. So now for homework, what you want to do is we have all these different pieces right here. So I'm going to hit 5. So we can go in the shaded mode. And what we want to do is put these together so that they match the position and scale, proportions, all that stuff right there of these reference images. Now you're probably going like, oh my God, that is a lot. And this is where it becomes important to take our big problem and make it into a smaller bunch of problems. Smaller problems are easier to figure out. So right now, a lot of you are looking at this and it's like, this is going to take forever. I need to put together the Mr. Potato Head, all of it. And you're thinking of like, how do I do this in like 1 or 2 steps? We don't. Instead, let's pick one thing. So let's pick the Mr. Potato Head. And let's start asking ourselves some questions. Let me select that. To match the location, scale, and position of the reference. What needs to happen for that one object? What's up?
Layer tool and move it in front of the images properly and see if it matches up.
Yep. And you just nailed it, which is I need to select it, move it over, and then make it smaller. So right now it's okay. We don't have to use the technical phrases. It will take some time. And even if you get in the industry, we're not sitting there and it's just like, grab the Y manipulator on the translate tool. Talk to any leader, like grab it, yank it over there. All right. But the thing is that yes, we will teach you technical phrases. It's okay to use just standard like language right there, which is just move it over. So the first thing we need is we have our reference. So first thing we need to hit closer to our reference. So we're going to hit W, move it over. We're going to kind of zoom in, and now, like you said, we can see that now in front of our reference, it's too big. So what key do I need to hit to make it smaller? R, exactly. Now, we do need to make sure that we're living in a 3D world. So we need to check in all of our 3 views. How do I get to this 4-panel view? Yep, left side on the screen, we have these 4 boxes. Now, if I need to bounce between these windows, what can I press? Spacebar. And that's the point. One, these tasks are to pretty much force you to kind of remember these like little hotkeys. So if we can break these down to smaller problems, it gives us bigger chances of reiterating all the different like little tiny things that we talked about. Because one of the things is that like if I give you, I always notice this with students, and I understand it from my life as well too. If I just give you a laundry list of like details and expect you to remember it, most of y'all will not, until you run into an issue that forces you to remember it. All right. We can always do cue cards and try to remember stuff and study it that way. But until you have a real life purpose to remember that, you won't. And that's the same way. I will see Maya will always release this demo reel of like all the new tools that they're going to use. And I will never remember that they're there until I run into a modeling situation where I will need it. And then at that point, it's burnt into my brain. So we got that right there. So the last one I'm gonna do right here is grab these eyes. So one of the hints that I will tell you is that for all these objects, all of them, you will scale. There will be no need to skew them. There's no need to skew them. All of them will need to be scaled, which means you're not going to change the proportions whatsoever. So in this case, somebody was asking, why would I use wireframe? Well, again, if we go right here and hit 5, it's a little bit harder to gauge the size of this code. But if I hit 4 and go in the wireframe, I can see through it and allow me to get better sizing. Likewise, let me go right here. What needs to happen with these eyes? And trust me, their eyes. Okay, so yep. First is move. And this is coming from me. Best thing I can always suggest is go watch other people model as well. Like ask these same questions of like Wade and Sarah and Brian, because my way, some parts may make sense to you, while other ways may make no sense. That's because this is Jared's way of modeling. But if you ask other people how they model, you can start building up your own wheelhouse of knowledge of where you can actually build your own methods of doing this. Because at the end of the day, everything that I'm showing you, there's 100 different ways to do the same element. All that matters is that we're getting to the same end result. So the best thing that you can do is witness and practice and experiment. So for me, I like to do like there's the order of operations in math, you know, plus, minus, multiply. Not going to go through all of them because I don't remember the actual order. But for me, it is move, rotate, then scale. And then you repeat that process over. First, we have to move it to where it needs to be. Next, we need to orient it to the direction of the object. And then from there, that allows us to fine tune whether it's too big or too small. Once we do this, so now we can see that, we repeat that same process. Now we see that once we scaled down, it's not in the right position. So we go back to move. And then ask ourselves, all right, cool, is it rotated right? It does look like it's rotated right. You probably need to bring it out some more. But for the most part, we just repeat, rinse and repeat. And we just do that for the rest of it. Any questions?
Creative liberties with the potato head, like make a smile instead of frown or something like that.
So we're on to, this is one of the weird things, and I know this is art school and we want y'all to be creative, but when it comes to grading stuff like this, it does need to match the image. So we're going to grade you on how close it is, because yes, I do understand like, hey, I want to make them smile and all that stuff right there. But if we say yes to that, then we get into at what point do we stop? Where it's just like, hey, I have them completely mixed up. Well, that was my artistic vision. And then at that point, that becomes very hard to grade. So yes. You want to match this image as much as possible. Now, we did not talk about, and this is usually the hotkeys that I never have to ever go over, because this is the first one that usually people will go and find themselves. But let's talk about how we undo and redo. All right, so here's the weird thing. If we go right here, we can get to undo by going to Edit, And then we can see right here, undo is Command Z, which is bullcrap. You can just hit Z. I don't know why they added command. You can just hit Z and then Shift Z to redo. And this is the same way with Windows. It'll say like, hey, do Control Z. No, just do Z. Z is how it works. Now in Unreal, it is Command Z or Control Z. Either one of those will work. But yeah, if you're ever curious or you go explore the menus, and then if it's something that like you find useful, usually we'll have a hotkey next to it, and that's a good indicator that, hey, I need to write that down. But undo is Z as in zebra, and then redo is Shift Z. Once you're done with putting together your Lego man, I said Lego man, he's Mr. Potato Head. You're building a Lego man on week 3. But we're gonna go right here. We're going to make sure that Maya is maximized. The perspective camera is maximized, which means instead of having a 4 view, we have this taking up the whole entire view like that right there. Make sure that it's easily viewable, and then take a screenshot. So frame up so we can actually see Mr. Potato Head all put together. All right, any questions? And again, if you have any questions, make sure that you go to today's lab. Remember today's lab, if you're campus, you can go to it either on campus or through the Zoom session. It's up to you. And also the labs are actually open to both online and campus students. What's up?
All of these lecture projects, they're due today.
No. So that's a good question to bring up. So what was asked was whether or not these lecture activities are due today. No. They are due at the same deadline as your week 1 competency. So pretty much you will have one turn-in deadline each week, which is usually the following Monday. So for y'all, this is not going to be due until 11:59 p.m. on July 12th. What's up?
So let me ask you this. Would you recommend getting them all done today?
So I would say, so it depends on you. I would say, yeah, try to get this done as soon as possible, because we're going to have lecture 2 on Friday, which is going to add even more lecture activities. And then you have that competency. You can see how this can snowball pretty quickly. So I would say set a goal and try to get them all done today and tomorrow. Best advice I can say is try to get the lecture activities done before the next lecture starts. All right, so that way you clear your plate and you're back in there. Because realize also at the same time, during this time, especially when we get into week 2, in between your lecture activities, you're going to also have to work on your competency, which, just to let you know, your week 2 is going to be you modeling 5 props and texturing them. A lot of stuff. So outside of that, that is about it. So what my goals for you today is, if you don't have your software installed, and by installed, I mean, make sure that it's installed, and then try to open it up. Make sure that it opens, all right? Make sure that, like, it's actually functioning. Make sure that you do that. If it's not doing that, make sure that you go to today's lab and ask questions on getting that fixed. Also, start working on your lecture 1 activities. You're going to have stacking for Maya, stacking for Unreal, diorama for Maya, diorama for Unreal, and then your potato head all put together. So that is going to be 5 screenshots all together. If you have questions on how you're going to take those screenshots, definitely make sure that you read the submission guidelines and then ask questions. Don't assume. All right. Especially post on the Discord. I know people are worried about people stealing their work, but that's one of the cool things about the fact that I can see your names in this right here. So, but that's the thing. Ask questions. All right. Any questions right now? All right. So outside that, lab does not start until 5. So I'm sure some of y'all want to go get lunch and all that stuff right there. So this is where I leave you. So lecture 2 is going to be about polygons, components, primitives, and how we make more interesting shapes. And then that is it. See you Friday. Your lab's going to be in a completely different room.
So are we going to move these computers that are there, or
So I think in that lab room, it's going to be, you're going to be bringing your computers. Yeah. Later on in the degree program, you will have labs with actual computers in there, but I still wouldn't even use them. Your laptops are actually pretty powerful. And then when it comes to rendering, we have our own rendering farm that you send your stuff off to.
So one question, Mr. Meter, how do you download your assignments again and turn them in?
So you can download your assignments from each one of the sections. So if we go right here to here, so when we get to Miss Potato Head, you download it by following the instructions right here where it says click right here, download that. And then from there, you unzip them and do the assignment. And then as far as uploading your screenshots of your done assignments, you will follow this guide right here, which it will show you where on the completion tools, which I probably need to update that. It looks like they've been changed, but not changed that much. We still have that screenshot right there. So this will tell you what to do with them right there. 9 times out of 10, if you're using screenshotting tools on Mac or Windows, it's always going to be PNG. You'll hardly ever see it as JPEG. But yeah, that's how you're going to upload that. Now, as far as your competencies, those will have very specific ways of uploading, and we will cover that on those individual projects. So
Awesome.
do we upload all the screenshots at once? It's up to you. You can do one as you get done. You can do them as you get done, or you can actually do them all at once. Either way, as long as you submit them properly, you should be fine.
Awesome.
All right. Outside of that, y'all take care.